Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Running Explained podcast. I am your host, Coach Elizabeth, and my guest this week is returning guest Cortney Berling, sports dietitian and owner of Eat Well, Run Better. And this is actually a very special episode because Cortney was my first ever guest on the podcast, episode 2. Season 1. She was the very first guest that I had on the show. And in that episode, we talked about Running Nutrition 101. It is one of the most popular episodes that I have ever done, probably because it's one of the oldest, but it is also one of the most popular topics, running nutrition, that we cover on the show. And so this week, Cortney and I are having a rehash, redux, revisiting of our conversation from almost 5 years ago at this point about Running Nutrition 101, the basics, the foundations, the fundamentals, what you need to know pre, during, post-run fueling, all the basics. So please enjoy. If you are looking for something even more special, we actually have a full, extra long, unedited, unfiltered version of this entire conversation, plus the beginning and like the pre-intro and the on Patreon, Running Explained Patreon. The Running Explained Patreon, you get bonus, like unedited, longer episodes. You get an additional extra episode Q&A once a month. We are working on doing a book club. We have Discord. We have a lot of fun exclusive things coming down the pipeline, one of which is these expanded, unedited, always ad-free when you're a Patreon member episodes. So go to patreon.com/Running Explained to learn more. And before we get started, one more thing, don't forget, this is actually time sensitive. Road to Race Day Philadelphia, our Philadelphia team training group, is kicking off August 4th, like 2.5 weeks from now, which is crazy. If you're running Philly, the half or the marathon, and you are looking for a better way to train, you are looking for weekly check-ins, you are looking for group accountability and support, you're looking for sports dietitian help from Stevie Lynn Smith. If you are looking for a better, more confident way to train for Philly, this is your sign. Join Road to Race Day. We have limited spots and it is filling up. runningexplained.com/Road to Race Day for all my Philly runners. All right, let's get started. Running Nutrition 101. Cortney, welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Oh, Elizabeth, thanks for having me. It's just like old times.
It really is. So this episode is very, very special for those of you who maybe you're a longtime listener, maybe this is the very first episode you're listening to, in which case, welcome. But Cortney, you were my very first guest ever on the podcast. You were the guest on season 1, episode 2. And all these years later, 4 or 5 years later, we're gonna celebrate, and we're just gonna do the episode again since it's one of the most popular, and we've come so far.
So far. I mean, it's crazy. I still cannot believe that I was your first ever guest. I feel so honored. But truly, I cannot believe it's been so long. I mean, I have 2 more kids than I had when I filmed that episode with you. And I mean, things have changed. We've both moved and our businesses have grown and changed. And yeah, it's really exciting.
So I think at that time you you had not yet moved to Japan, and I know you've moved back.
Yeah.
Where was I? I was recording episodes in our rental apartment in Connecticut. And yeah, things have changed.
Yeah, I was living in Virginia, which is funny because that's where you are now. Yeah. I was in Quantico, Virginia. And then for those of you that missed the years in between there, my family's military family, my husband's active duty Marine Corps. We moved to Okinawa, Japan for 3 years, which is the best thing ever. A friend of mine said the other day that leaving Okinawa was like the greatest heartbreak of her life. And I was like, yes, that is exactly how I feel. Way to put that into words. It's so hard to move back after you've been there. But anyways, now we're in Portland, Oregon. And honestly, it's awesome here too. So just trying to thrive wherever we are.
You and I keep missing each other. So I lived in Oregon for a while before we left, before we moved back east. So, oh my gosh, okay, well, just playing leapfrog. So knowing that actually, you know what? Let's going to have a brief reintroduction. Go ahead and briefly tell us, Cortney, who are you?
Oh, goodness. Who am I? That's a loaded question. So I'm a registered dietitian and running coach. I am the founder of Eat Well, Run Better. It is a program designed for runners. I really focus on teaching runners how to fuel and train in a healthy and sustainable way. I'm very anti-diet. I want to make sure that all of my athletes are fueled to be strong, and I want them to be confident on race day. We don't count calories. We don't weigh ourselves in my program. I really love this anti-diet approach. I want runners to find that intuitive eating side mixed with sports nutrition science. And that is essentially the business side of who I am. But I'm also a mom of three kids under the age of 6 currently. So it's a busy, it's a busy household here. And like I said, we live in Portland, Oregon now. My husband is in the Marine Corps, and we are always busy, always on the move, always up to something. I can say that. Camping, biking, running, racing. I still love racing and being part of the active running community here.
How have you found the racing scene in Portland?
Oh my gosh, it's insane. It's so awesome. I mean, I lived in Massachusetts for a while, and so it's pretty comparable to New England where, like I think I'm a pretty good runner, and then I get in these, New England and Portland. I feel like those are the two strongest running communities that I've seen. Well, and San Diego, we lived there for a little bit too. But I feel all of a sudden like I'm just very average among my peers here, which is so awesome to be surrounded by so many great athletes, male and female. But there's never a shortage of running groups. There's never a shortage of races. You can always find a friend to run with.
It's just so interesting that you say that. And I agree, that there are a handful of places in the world where you could just be out running and then get totally, destroyed by an Olympian who's just out for their morning jog as well. But that you say that about the competitive nature of where you live when you yourself are a very competitive runner. And I just want to point out that no matter how fast you are, there's always that like, yeah, but that person's faster than me. Like we always do that.
Definitely. I mean, always. And that's what makes running so fun, right? Is I think two things can be true at the same time, right? You can be proud of where you're at and how far you've come and what you've accomplished, but you can also have a quest for more. And that's, again, what makes running so special is you're never fully satisfied.
Absolutely. There's always more. You can always move that goalpost a little bit further. Oh, well, today we're talking about running nutrition 101, the basics, the foundations, the fundamentals, the very bare minimum that we want runners to know about how to fuel their bodies for training, not just racing, although that's also important. But Cortney, obviously you are a dietitian. You have been doing this for a number of years now.
Yeah.
What is the most common issue, concern, desire that people have when they come and start working with you for the first time?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I would say the number one issue that runners come to me for is they just want to know how to fuel their training right. They can feel like something's off. They can feel like they're not progressing, and there's a gap there, and it's usually nutrition, which they're aware of. That's what they say. What I end up seeing is that they're underfueling and they just don't realize it. So sometimes we don't even know that we're underfueling. We just know that there might be a disconnect, or we know that things aren't progressing the way that it is, but we don't always know that it is underfueling. And I really think that's the crux of the issue.
How many runners do you work with who come to you and say, I think I probably can work on my fueling, but I also just want to be able to train harder?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's definitely the majority. I would say about half. There's half of my population is very much of like, I know that I have a fear of carbohydrates. I know that I'm afraid to gain weight, and I know that that's holding me back. And so there's that camp that people kind of fall into. And then there's the other side of things where it's like, I just want to take it all to the next level, and I need that edge. I need that 1% that I'm missing. And so I definitely see both sides of that. And they also kind of go together. Like I said, once we start peeling the onion back, we end up finding that people are ultimately usually a little afraid of carbohydrates because of the society that we live in and the diet culture, or they have this fear of weight gain. And spoiler alert, eating more carbs doesn't always mean you're going to gain weight. It's just that's what people think.
Let's back up even further, because we have skipped a step. We've skipped an explanation, which is, why are we even having this conversation? Why is fueling so important? We spend so much time talking about training and easy running and tapering and periodization and all of that. But we are talking about fueling because it's important, but Cortney, can you explain how important it is?
I'll do my best to convey that because it is so important. I mean, I'm sure you stress a lot about how important it is to have a rest day. And I know, we love preaching about easy runs, as do I. This is the other puzzle piece, right? Like it all fits together and the puzzle's never going to be complete if the nutrition isn't right. I like to think of it as I'm a big visual person as I talk with my hands. So I always give my clients an analogy. So I'll give you guys this analogy. When you do your training run, it's kind of like they're all little Lego blocks. But if you want to stack those trainings together and create a tower, that's the nutrition. The nutrition is what actually stacks it. Training actually breaks your body down and nutrition builds it up. So to put all those pieces together and to stick together, you need the nutrition.
You said a lot of runners who come to you are actually, you said underfueling, so not fueling enough. What does that look like?
Oof, it can look like a lot of different things. And I think the first and most important thing to point out here is that they're not necessarily underweight by definition if we were going to use a bogus BMI chart, but being underfueled could look like anything. And so some of these runners are maybe just not eating before their run or not eating enough before their run, or maybe they're not taking enough intra-run fuel. They're only taking 2 gels in a marathon. That's certainly not enough. But it can also be fueling throughout the day. A lot of times what I see is people are busy, right? Whether you're a mom or you're working, we have these busy schedules and there might be a big gap in your day where you're just not getting enough to eat. And then you come home and you tend to eat a little bit more. And maybe the caloric intake ends up being about even by the end of the day, but it's not distributed to where your body needs it and the body perceives it as being underfueled.
With underfueling that I have seen as a coach and personally in me as a runner is that it's really hard to make sure that you're eating enough when you are increasing your volume. I'm going to say for me, because it seems like there comes a point where I just have reached enough food. Like, oh, this seems like enough food. And so even if I am adding more miles in my brain, I've just kind of been stuck at this. Well, this is how much food I should be eating. And I'm kind of like stuck there. And so I don't ever increase past that. And that can lead to like underfueling because I'm running more, but not eating more. I've seen that in myself and some of the clients I work with. The other type of underfueling that I tend to see is also completely unintentional. But it's that there's no kind of understanding that you need to scale your nutrition at all based on your training volume. So it's kind of like similar to the first one. So it's this idea of like, in one situation, you could absolutely be eating plenty for what you're trying to accomplish, but as things change, that could no longer be the case. And I think it's that disconnect between like, well, it used to be enough, but it's not enough anymore. That piece, that recognition is where a lot of people struggle.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's such a good thing to bring up here because, the more miles you're running, the more carbohydrates you need to be eating. And so if you're adding to your training, you're adding those miles, but you're not adding to your plate, it's going to end up leaving you with a gap. And that gap might start to feel like you're overtraining. And that's what athletes start to blame it on is, oh, I can't handle high mileage, or, oh, I'm so exhausted when I'm marathon training. But the real issue is that you might just not be eating enough to match the demands of training.
How often are you working with an athlete and you suspect that pretty much the only reason they haven't been able to achieve their goal is due to a fueling issue, not necessarily a training or a fitness issue?
I would definitely say it's the majority of people that I see. There's a few where I'm like, oh, you're just doing way too much, intensity, or, that there's always those outliers. But I would say the majority of athletes that come to me that I'm seeing, they're just not fueling properly, whether it's a timing issue or an amount issue or, GI issues that might be holding them back. I think those are kind of the 3 camps that people end up falling under.
Today, I want to focus more on fueling around our runs. And I know we've talked about this before. You and I have done a whole episode on the athlete's plate, which is about your nutrition essentially during the rest of the day as a runner. That's a really interesting episode to go back and listen to. But today I want to really want to focus on that pre-run, in-run, post-run the basics, what you need to know. This is the foundation, like I said, of building on your knowledge of fueling for runners. So although people might have questions about, well, how much is enough? What does that look like? That would be a conversation for a different day. So right now, let's just focus on that pre-run, in-run, post-run. Cortney, so many runners wake up crazy early, get their run in, are like done and showered and at work before the sun rises. A lot of those runners do not have time to fuel. Why do we need to even eat something before we run?
That is the age-old question. And this is especially important for female athletes. And the science behind this is that when we get up in the morning, we are completely depleted. Our liver glycogen is what keeps our blood sugar stable overnight. And so we have no glucose essentially stored in the liver. We're only relying on what might be stored in the muscles from yesterday, and our blood sugar is a little low. And so when you wake up in the morning, not only are you depleted, but your cortisol level, which is your stress hormone, starts to rise. That's what gets us up. That's what gets us out of bed. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but especially for female athletes, when you eat, that shuts down some of that cortisol from continuing to rise. It starts to tell the body, we're in a safe environment. We have food coming in. It is okay to lower the cortisol hormone, and it is okay to start burning carbohydrates for energy because we have some available. So all of that is happening. And then when you don't eat before a run, you go on this run and that cortisol level continues to rise. And with that cortisol level rising, we actually store more fat and break down more muscle. And that is the exact opposite of what we want happening when we're going out to run. So when you do eat before your run, not only are you stopping that cortisol level from rising, you're having the energy to go out and run, and you're going to be able to hit higher intensities. You're going to be able to run longer, and then you're actually going to recover faster because you're less depleted after that run. So hopefully that is just enough to want to make people more interested in fueling before they run, because I think it's a huge piece that's missing.
I want to dig into this a little bit more because obviously this is something that you have extensive professional education and experience in. Like, yes, this is also what the research says, but also, I mean, I ran for years without eating anything, like totally fasted. And by and large, from day to day, it didn't seem like it was impacting me that much. And I think the reason I want to dig into this a little bit more is because when we're talking about things like, like cortisol or these concepts where people are maybe seeing some misinformation or fear mongering around certain topics, to kind of like actually understand that it's probably not the like end of the world that some people might make it out to be, but it is important and we should care about these things for specific reasons. So I've talked about this before on the show, I ran for several years, everything fasted, like no carbs, felt mostly fine most of the time. Slowly but surely, unbeknownst to me, I was actually digging myself into an overtraining hole because I wasn't eating enough carbohydrates specifically. Ended up with a nasty, nasty, nasty case of relative energy deficiency in sport, and I've been crawling out of the hole ever since. I would love to hear some of your experience, if you have any personal experience with running, fasted, or any athletes that you work with, because with running especially, it's like every individual day might not feel like it's adding up to anything, like you just said with Lego blocks, but over time it can. And so one of the reasons that I talk about how important it is to eat something before your run is because I don't want you to get complacent about it. Well, it feels fine today. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, you have reds and you're like, can't run. So like, I want to talk about this, right? Because it's important that we normalize that, yes, even if you do run fasted, you're not going to explode, but it's still important to eat something, and here's why.
Absolutely. I think you brought up a great point that you can't always see it happening. And that's honestly what makes nutrition so tricky, is that it's not black and white and you cannot see it right before your eyes. It's something that tends to happen over time. And I actually just having this conversation with one of my running friends the other day, and he said, oh, well, so-and-so only takes 2 gels on a marathon and look how well he's done. And I said, yes, but imagine how good he could be if he took the appropriate amount. Sometimes you don't know until you see the other side. So you might think, I feel fine, I don't need it. Trust me, I get so much backlash about eating a banana before the run. Like, people get really upset when I recommend some carbohydrates before a run. And it's like, wow, that's so crazy. Just simply giving your body a little bit more nutrition, what a difference it can make. You just don't even know it until you try it a different way. And our Gatorade, all these sports companies, this is what they're made for. They're not made for us to be sitting on the couch playing video games. They're made for runners like you who are on a time crunch and who need that fuel to get going and to accomplish goals.
Can you describe, if you can, what it feels like to have a workout or a run that is fueled versus not fueled? Because, and again, going back to, you kind of maybe don't realize what it feels like until you try something different. I genuinely kind of thought that most runs should end with me feeling bad. Like, I just thought that was normal. No matter how slow I went, or even if I had a great workout, I always ended up feeling just bad. And that happens far, far, far less now that I eat something before my runs and workouts.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty, like, I didn't realize that I wasn't supposed to feel bad all the time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a perfect example right there. I mean, obviously, like, the most obvious is if you're ending that run feeling like nauseous, or you have a headache, or like some strong physical symptoms. But even less than that, maybe it just takes you a couple of days to recover. It shouldn't take you that long. If you feel like you need a nap, especially after a long run, you really shouldn't. I mean, like I said, I'm a mom of 3 kids, and I just did the Eugene Marathon not long ago, and there was no time for naps. And so proper fueling makes that different. It makes it so that you don't need a nap, that you're not having that mid-afternoon energy crash. That's another sign that you're not fueling properly. If you finish that run feeling like you gave all on that run, no, like, that should only be a feeling that you achieve on race day. But you should always feel like when you end your run that you could do another mile, or you could do one more rep at the track. It should never feel like this is the end all be all, I've spent it all, because, like I said, that's a feeling that you want to reserve for race day only.
So let's talk about what to eat before a run. Like you said, graham crackers, banana, some sort of juice or sport drink. What are some other options?
Yeah. So if you're running less than an hour, especially in the morning, 30 grams of carbs is generally going to be enough. You can always do more. This is not a ceiling. This is just a bare minimum amount. And so we had already said graham crackers and banana. Those are 2 of my favorite. Toast. My kids got me onto raisin toast. It's so delicious. So raisin toast with jam is a good one. What else do I like? A Lara bar before the track is one of my favorite ones. That with a cup of coffee go really well together. The scratch high carb drinks are awesome. An easy way to get those electrolytes, fluid, and carbs all in one place. You can even take a gel before your run. I know we think of those as intra-run during the run, but they can be consumed before a run. There's all kinds of different sport bars. I know Precision Fuel and Hydration makes one. I just got it. It's like 60 grams of carbs in this little tiny bar. I know, right? So something like that is certainly an option. And then I know Elizabeth talks about this a lot on her Instagram, but Pop-Tarts, you can eat a Pop-Tart. I know we're going to like lose some listeners here. Don't hang up. But just as you start to run longer, so let's look at something when you're doing longer runs, something more than 70 minutes or a more intense run. That's where we need more like 75 to 90 grams of carbohydrates, but you need more time for digestion here. So that's where something like a Pop-Tart can come in handy, a bagel, or you can pair a few of those earlier examples together, like a banana with the graham crackers, or I love doing a sports drink with a bowl of oatmeal. And then, right there, you can easily hit 60 to 75 grams of carbs when you start to pair things together, especially tap into the liquid, because then you're getting something solid in your belly like a bagel and that fluid and the hydration, but you don't feel overloaded with either option.
So let's talk about that heftier pre-run option. So let's say if this is before a long run, it's already a longer run. We're already running up against more time constraints. I mean, how early are we talking about it getting up? I know for a lot of runners, they say, well, I don't want to get up 2 hours before my run just to eat something, right? It can't be that big of a deal.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So, your bigger long runs, like your 16, 18, 20 mile runs, I think of those as like your dress rehearsal before the race. So those are the ones where you're going to want to try to mimic race day as close as possible. Now, I do not need you waking up at 3 in the morning, but those are the runs where I would really try to nail down that timing to see if your race day nutrition plan is suitable and it is working specifically with your GI system. So those like 2 to 3 runs are the most important to try to have the timing you would on race day, which would be about 2 hours before the race. For the rest of your long runs, anywhere from an hour, you might even get away with 30 minutes. It depends on how your stomach is. The saying of like having a strong stomach, if you have a strong stomach, you might be able to eat a bagel and bust out the door 10 minutes later, and it might not be an issue for you. And that's fine. You don't need to wait. The waiting game is for you to have some digestion if it's upsetting your stomach. So that's where the 2 hours come in. But again, if you don't have 2 hours, don't wait 2 hours. And the closer you get to your run, that's when you want things to be simpler. So if you only have 30 minutes before your run, and a bagel's not working for you, that's where you might want to just do a gel and a carbohydrate electrolyte drink. Keep it simpler the sooner it is to your run.
Because we've talked a lot or exclusively about carbs in this situation. We're not looking for protein here. Protein is not the pre-run snack of choice.
Correct. Minimal protein. If you're doing a longer run, something like 5 or 10 grams of protein in there would be fine. It helps with some blood sugar control and satiety. Like you're not going to get super hungry while you're running, hopefully, but it's not an important macronutrient for us. Sometimes it works its way in. Bread has protein in it, peanut butter has protein in it. So something like that, you might end up with 5 or 10 grams, and that's fine. But something like a protein bar or a protein shake would not be what we're looking for before the run.
What about things like pre-workout?
Yeah, that's a really big umbrella, right? Like there's so many different types of pre-workouts. And so I would say, number one, make sure that it has been verified by a third party, that it is, got that NSF stamp on it or Informed Sport, that somebody verified what's in there matches what's on the label. I would also check the caffeine content and make sure that it's an amount of caffeine that your body can handle and that works well with you. Caffeine can be great before a run. It is actually a performance enhancer if your body handles it well. So just check the caffeine in there. Some of them have a really high amounts of caffeine, so we want to check on that. And I would also just double check the ingredients, see what you're drinking. Some of them have a lot of artificial ingredients. If it has fake sugar or sugar alcohols, that's actually the cause of bloat and upset stomach. And then runners end up blaming carbohydrates when it's actually the fake sugar. So just double check the ingredients. Something like a pre-workout can work, but honestly, the simpler the better. Like stick with your banana, stick with, a basic electrolyte drink, but I'm not going to say that a pre-workout is bad. It just depends.
You mentioned, and you've mentioned a couple times, something that I think is a big question mark for a lot of runners, and that is that the stomach issues, the GI issues. So, for me, one of the reasons that I didn't eat before runs or during runs for a long time was because whenever I did, I would get stomach cramps or a side stitch. So I thought, well, if I have anything in my stomach, it's just going to make me uncomfortable, so I'm not going to eat anything. And I've since talked to runners who say that they don't even drink water on runs because it gives them side stitches. That concerns me a little bit, but let's talk about why GI issues are so common. And I'm sure you hear this all the time from runners who say, well, I can't eat anything because it just gives me a side stitch.
Yeah, definitely. So the side stitch issue alone is potentially related to nutrition and hydration. Sometimes it actually might not be that you're having enough of either of those things, but it can also just be a breathing issue or more of a mechanical, like, your stride, your breathing, how shallow you're breathing. So it may not even be nutrition related at all. But then the side stitch situation tells me too that it might be a timing issue. You might just need a little bit more time for digestion, or choosing a simpler carbohydrate like a gel before your run would probably be. So if I were to put those in order of hierarchy, I would check your breathing, check your form. That very much could be related to the side stitch, and then the timing, and then the contents of it. So you can always eat the same food, but give yourself more time for digestion. And if that doesn't work, then try simpler carbohydrates. Okay. Now, if you're having just general GI issues, you gotta stop and go to the bathroom. So this is really tricky. It's very individualized, but I will say that most runners It's actually because they're underfueling. And I'm not trying to blame everything today on underfueling, I promise. But it's honestly sometimes when we don't have enough nutrition, enough carbohydrates, enough energy coming in, our gut motility, how well our GI system is working and moving things through the body actually slows down. And so sometimes when we are more fueled throughout the day and pre-run, we actually have less GI issues. Obviously, dehydration is going to exacerbate any GI issues, because what happens when you're running is, your heart's pumping, your muscles are working, and your fluid is distributed elsewhere, right? And when you try to take something like a gel, now all of that water starts to come into the GI system to try to digest that gel, and that actually exacerbates dehydration, and that GI motility again has a really hard time turning over. And so if we start hydrated and we stay hydrated, that's going to just keep everything working the way that it should be, essentially.
With underfueling, and again, I know it's something we talk about all the time, and longtime listeners are probably like, this is a great recap. I've heard all this information before. Thank you so much. But again, this is not an issue that's going away. We have more runners joining our sport every single day. The big thing that I hear about fueling and underfueling is, well, I'm not losing weight, so how can I be underfueling? Or I've lost weight, but like my weight is stable, or I'm not underweight, how can I be underfueling? So we can have some of these issues going on, like GI distress, or poor sleep, or bad recovery, or things that could signal underfueling. But the runner's saying, hey, my body size does not indicate there's a problem here.
Yeah. And that is something I hear often, because it's important to recognize that your weight isn't really telling the whole story, right? Your body wants to be at its natural weight, and it's going to fight to keep your weight where it naturally falls. So if you're not eating enough, it's going to slow down the metabolism in order to keep your weight where it naturally should be. And so, other signs that you're not feeling right, if your hair is dull or falling out, your nails are brittle, you might have skin issues. When I was under fueling, I had really bad acne, and we just thought it was genetic, which kind of also was, but it was under fueling. And so there's other like physical symptoms. Obviously, the biggest red flag is being, if you're of menstruating age, then you should be getting a period. If you're not, that is a huge red flag. But those things are important even if your weight hasn't changed, because again, your metabolism is going to slow, or your body might be breaking down muscle for energy. And so your weight stays stable, but you're actually losing muscle. So nutrition is more important than what meets the eye.
So let's talk about how we can fuel to feel like total badasses. So we don't have to worry about these things. We can just talk about how to keep crushing those PRs. So we've eaten our pre-run snack. We're good with it. Now I'm on my run. I'm in a run. What are the guidelines for fueling during a run?
Yeah. Okay. This is my favorite part. I don't know why I love intra-run fuel, because it feels like such an art and a science at the same time. And there are so many products on the market now. Like, honestly, I feel like we are very lucky. When I did my first marathon, I feel like GU was the only option, at least all that I really knew. I mean, I'm sure there were others, but that was the only one that was ever talked about. And so now the guidelines are about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour, unless you're running longer than 2 hours, which for most of us, that's going to be the marathon and potentially the half marathon, right? And so when you're running more than 2 hours, up to 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour is what the body can start to utilize. You have to practice with that. You have to train your body to do that. So what that means to train your stomach is, as you start running longer, you need to continue to incrementally increase your gels. You can't just save them for race day and think, oh, I'm just going to use these gels on race day and I'm going to feel so much better because I'm going to have all these carbs in my system. No, you have to train your GI system to utilize them so you don't have GI issues on race day. So, on a 10-mile run, that takes you 80 minutes. You might practice taking, 1 or 2 gels, and then you can incrementally increase that up. So anyways, that's how much carbs you need. 30 to 60 grams per hour, unless you're doing more than 2 hours, up to 90 grams. And then sodium is super important. So 300 to 600 milligrams of sodium per hour. And that has a big asterisk next to it. One of my athletes just did a sweat test, and we saw how much sodium she was losing. Now she lives in Texas, which she's super hot all summer, and she's losing way more sodium than those guidelines. So this is very individualized. And if you are a salty sweater and you have that salt ring around your hair, on your clothes when you're done running, that actually indicates that you lose more sodium than the average person, and you need to intake more sodium. So 300 to 600 milligrams, per hour at a minimum. And then fluid, 12 to 24 ounces at a minimum per hour. It's okay to go more than that as long as you have your sodium on board. I don't want you just drinking water. You absolutely need those electrolytes as well.
Ah, what a good crash course. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know. Did you have your notepads out?
Right, take notes. Sorry. 30
Yeah.
to 60, 60 to 90. So, with the sodium, I want to ask you, I have seen some recent research that indicates that sodium ingestion during endurance exercise might not actually, I'm going to say, some studies that look like it doesn't improve performance. And I want to know if you have any kind of thoughts on that, or if you had seen that anywhere. And then also kind of my reaction to that was, well, I never necessarily thought that it was about replacing lost sodium. I thought a lot of the sodium that we were taking in this situation, like on a run, was to help with the fluid absorption, to get all the fluids that we needed. And that might be like two completely different questions. I'm sorry to just like throw them at you like this.
No, that's a good question. And I don't know all the latest research, but I do know that the Morton gels and even Precision, which are two gels that I regularly use, they don't have sodium in them. Or if they do, it's very minimal, like hardly enough to count in this situation, less than 20 or so milligrams. And so again, don't quote me on this, but what I think I understand with Morton is that they're concerned that the sodium is, one, not needed, but also can interfere with how well we digest the gel, especially like a hydrogel. So there's that, but the risk just isn't worth it to me. We do know that we need sodium for fluid absorption, right? Because otherwise we can become hyponatremic, not enough sodium, and that can lead to some really serious health issues. And the marathon is very far away, right? So we want to make sure that we are respecting the distance and treating it as such, that this is really important, that we're replacing fluids and sodium so that our body can absorb those fluids. But it's also used in like muscle contraction and how our body is handling the run itself. And so I don't feel like we're at a point right now in science where we can say we don't really need the sodium. I would err on the side of caution that let's continue to take in that sodium. It is not leading to high blood pressure in this situation. Daily American diet, who are not running, might be more of an issue for sure. But what you need to understand, and this is kind of the same for carbs too, is we can't follow the general recommendations when we hear like, oh, we eat too many carbs, or oh, it's like we have a really high sodium diet. Runners need those things. And that's what differentiates a runner's diet from somebody who is just maybe doing some regular walking or Pilates or, great exercise, but not sweating profuse amounts like the rest of us.
But what about somebody who says, well, I don't run that much. I'm not that serious. This doesn't apply to me.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people end up saying that, because I also hear, oh, well, I don't run that fast, so I don't need as many gels. Oh, I get cringe when I hear somebody tell me that. It's not a status symbol. You need it. If you are running, sure, if you're running 3 miles on a winter day and you didn't even break a sweat, yeah, we don't need copious amounts of sodium for sure. But if you are running more than an hour, especially in the sun, fluid, sodium, even how fast your body is using its glycogen stores, glycogen is just the fancy word for stored carbohydrates, you're burning through those stores faster. So I want you to look at the duration of which you're running, not the amount of miles, because somebody who, runs a marathon in 6 hours, you might think, well, I'm not fast enough to require those gels. I'm not a real athlete. Oh, I hate when somebody says that. You are absolutely an athlete. If you run on purpose, you are a runner. And if you are out there for 6 hours, guess what? You actually need double the fuel. Your fueling becomes more important than for somebody who is running 3 hours or faster.
I think we need to give people permission. And I can't take credit for this. I had a guest recently, Jeff Horowitz, who said this in his book, Think Like a Runner. He said, we need to give people permission to take themselves seriously. If you're signed up for a marathon or a half marathon, or heck, even, I would say even, if you're signed up for any race, or if you run, or you're listening to this podcast, like, it's okay to take yourself seriously. You are allowed to do all the things possible to enjoy your hobby. And fueling is probably a really important part. Having trained fueled and underfueled, fueled is way more fun.
Yes, definitely. I love that. You have the permission to take yourself seriously. And I think that's true in a lot of different aspects of life. I mean, I remember even when I started my business, it was like, oh, it's just a hobby. Oh, it's just this side thing, and it's like, no, like say it out loud, be proud of it. And it's okay to take up space. Like, especially for those of you on the starting line to think like, oh, I'm not very good. Oh, I'm not going to be very fast. You deserve to be there just as much as the next person. You don't have to earn that spot. If you trained for it and it matters to you, be there and be proud of that.
Let's go back to our in-run fueling, because we're talking about some amounts that really freak people out. Again, thinking about those longer runs or something like a marathon, or really anything, 2.5 hours. But for runners who say, well, it's 90 minutes, easy, long run, like I don't need fuel. Do I really need to take anything with me?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things when my runner tells me, "Oh, it's just 10 miles." And like, oh, that's when you know you're marathon training, when it becomes just 10 miles.
I'd say
Like,
only 90 minutes to
yeah,
run continuously, to run for 90 minutes on top of all the other running you already did this week. Come on, people.
yeah. I don't think this is a real term. I think it's something that I made up. So I don't know if I should quote myself or somebody else, but I call it mileage blindness, when you start to like not even know you're running, like when you just 10 miles becomes nothing, or even if it's 5 miles, all of a sudden it's just 5 miles. I don't need all this. It's like you're blind to that mileage increase. So anyways, the question here is, do you really need it? Yes, because not only is this an opportunity to maybe practice a new gel, you don't want to waste a new gel on a 20-mile run that's going to be your like dress rehearsal for race day. You want to try all those new gels or chews on easier runs that feel a little less important, a little less high stakes. So it's a great time to try new things. It's a great time to practice training your stomach. And it's also, taking those gels is going to make that run more enjoyable, but also make that recovery way better. Because when you don't take a gel or a fluid on a 10-mile run or a 90-minute run because you didn't need it, I'm putting that in quotations, what ends up happening is you end that run so depleted, it takes you a lot longer to fill your glycogen stores back up. But if you don't deplete yourself completely, it's not as hard to recover from that. And you can bounce back and be ready for the next run quicker.
I just realized as we're having this conversation that I've been approaching this whole topic as just trying to convince people to eat something. And I'd like to change angles. I'd like to assume that our listeners are already 100% on board with all the things that you are talking about and that we are discussing today. So we're gonna continue in that vein, rather than like please eat something, because this is important, right? Going back to taking yourself seriously, but also like being like doing your hobby correctly, or like safely, I guess. Even, I don't care how serious you are or are not. If you're going to be out there running for a couple hours, then you should do it properly. And that probably includes fuel.
Yeah. Just like you would go buy the right shoes or the fastest shoes. Let's do the right steps with the nutrition. Let's get that low hanging fruit first.
All right, awesome. So we have our runners who are so excited to fuel. Cortney, can I ask you, like, what is the most fuel per hour that you have worked up to in training or in a race?
Me personally?
Mm-hmm.
During the Eugene Marathon, I took about 75 grams of carbs per hour in the marathon.
Nice. How did you take that in?
Okay, let me see. Quiz time. I alternated between, and I am not paid by any of these brands. However, if they want to pay me, please email me, because gels are getting expensive. But I alternated between the Morton caffeinated gels and the Precision Fuel and Hydration gels, which are each about, I'm going to call them 30 grams of carbs. I think the Mortons are technically 25, but for the sake of math, we'll go with 30. And then I alternated between water and Gatorade at every other aid station. They had those every, I forget if it was every mile or every 2 miles now, but I alternated water, Gatorade, water, Gatorade. So I was getting in, somewhere between 6 and 12 ounces of Gatorade every hour, I think is a fair assessment, and then water on the opposite stations. And then I took a sodium capsule, also made by Precision. I took 2 of them, one each hour. And I think that was it. Yeah. So, I don't know if I said the timing. I took one gel every 25 minutes. And so instead of doing every 30, which is kind of what I thought I might do, I went with every 25 because I actually didn't feel great in my race. My race went fantastic and I negative split the course, but it didn't feel as easy as I was hoping. So right away I was like, I'm taking more gels. Like I need as much as I can in my legs. Like I just like don't feel great and this isn't what I wanted it to feel like. So I really use those gels to kind of literally power me through.
The first gel in a race, especially a marathon, but a half marathon too, when you take your first gel, that for me is the point in the race where like we're in it. Game on, like we're here now. Like that makes it very real for some reason.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, maybe I'm crazy, but I look forward to to my intra race fuel. It's like, snack time, even if they don't taste super great, it's like something else to do, right? Like you get to open it and you get to consume it, and it just takes your mind off of running for just a couple of moments.
It helps chunk the course up even more, which sometimes you really need.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say, I went out there, I forget exactly how many gels I took now. I think it was 6. But I went out with the intent to only take 5. That was going to be my one every 30 minutes. Again, I'm doing the math on the fly here, 2, 4. Yeah, it was going to be 5. And I gave my training partner who was not running my sixth gel. And I was going to see him at mile 16. And I was like, just be ready. I don't know if I'm going to need that gel, but just like have it out. And as soon as I saw him, I'm like, a quarter mile away and I'm like waving to him and I'm trying to like motion like gel, I need the gel. I'm like, what a great pit stop. Yeah. So I don't necessarily recommend doing that. Just carry it all in case that person's not there. But luckily he was there and supplied that extra gel for me.
So where did those gels go? So I will also say, so you said you took 6 gels. Like I said,
Yeah.
I know you are a competitive runner. So we're looking at a 3-ish hour marathon.
Yeah, I ran 2 hours and 52 minutes.
Congratulations.
Thanks. I thought you'd never ask.
2 hours and 50, how many minutes? 52?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It was 52 minutes.
2 hours. So, okay, under 3 hours, 2 hours and 52 minutes. Okay, good.
You got that? Did you write that down too?
When I run a sub 3 marathon, everybody's going to know.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I will say, I would love to know how you carry your gels. For me, I made the mistake of not road testing, carrying all of the gels I was going to carry on race day in training because I didn't need them. So especially for running a race that doesn't allow vests to wear. And I love wearing a vest in a marathon because that's where you can put all your gels. But if you're running a race without a vest and you need to put your gels on your person, I would strongly recommend seeing how that works for you in training, so it doesn't happen to you like it happened to me in Chicago, where my pockets were so full of gels that my shorts were falling down. And they're compression shorts too. They're spandex shorts, so I'd have to yank them up. And over time, as I ate my gels, it stopped happening. But I was thinking, oh my God, I didn't even think about trying this out, but please, please, please do.
Yes, that is such a good tip. I mean, just these things that we don't think about. There's so many logistics that go into race day, from the travel and the booking the hotel and the carb load and all this, but we forget these little details of where to store your gels. Mm-hmm. So for me, I mean, I will admit, having only needed 5 or 6 gels, that does make it easier, right? The longer you're running, you're going to end up needing 8 or 9 gels potentially. So it depends, but I love the Rabbit Speed Leggy shorts. Those are my absolute favorite. I have a couple pairs of them. They have pockets on both sides plus the back pocket. So, I could easily store at a minimum 1 on each side plus 1 in the back pocket. So there's 3 gels right there at a minimum. And that's not, you could even double up the sides of the shorts, but we don't want them falling down. And then I always keep my my on deck gel, the one I'm going to have next in my sports bra. So, for you ladies, we have an extra storage compartment there. And so I kind of like, I'm rotating, like I get the next one ready. It's like right there. And then sometimes I'll even start with one in my hand and I just carry it. Like, I just don't mind carrying one. So that's kind of my rotation is like, what did I just count? That's 5 right there. One in the hand, one in the sports bra, 2 in each pocket, and one in like the back zipper pocket. But there's a company called Bandit, and they sell some, again, I assume they're for men as well. I'm sorry, I haven't checked out the men's selection, but they're crop tops for women that have gel pockets in the back. I do think you need a little dexterity or like, some mobility in your shoulders to like reach those back pockets of the gels. But I'm trying to think and imagine that there's like probably 5 or 6 pockets just there in the back, which are amazing. So something like that would be a really great option. And certainly if you're carrying a water bottle, you can, either tape one to your water bottle, or if your water bottle has a little pocket, shove 1 or 2 in there as well.
Yeah, it is about getting creative. And I love that you said at the beginning of this segment that it's a science and an art, figuring out your in-run fueling. So I will say the water bottle pockets, the first time I heard somebody describe that, I had no idea what they were talking about. But there are essentially little, I guess they're popular now because you can get them for your Stanley, but little like pouches you can get that go around a disposable water bottle or like a Camelback, or I have one from Amphipod, and you can shove gels in that little zipper pocket. I like to have like my keys in there too if I take it for a run. The other thing too I will say, and this is my great limit, and I asked you about kind of your max carb intake. The most carbohydrate I've ever been able to take was not in a race, it was in training, and I worked my way up to average of 88 grams per hour.
Woo-hoo.
Using a combination of like liquid, like mixed carbs and gels. And I think it was probably a little bit more than I can handle at the time, but I found for me, the limiting factor was not necessarily the amount of carbohydrates, it was the amount of fluid that I needed. And for, when you're self-supported, when you're carrying your own fluids in training, or in a race even, sometimes it's hard to have everything that you need. And so I think I probably just didn't have enough fluid in general to digest all of it because I sweat a lot. But yeah, that was done through a combination of, like I said, mixed like liquid carbs, so GU Roctane mix, and then I think Martin gels and salt stick caps. So Cortney and I have just described 2 high carb fueling scenarios that are similar but also very different. So it really is just about being creative.
Yeah. And there's definitely science to prove, and research, I guess, to prove that different carbohydrates use different transporters. So varying your carbohydrate intake actually helps with carbohydrate absorption. So whether that be from a gel that uses multiple carb sources like glucose and fructose, or maltodextrin and glucose, something like that, that's one option. But even just varying your gels and then adding in a carbohydrate drink. So, that's, you described Morton and GU, and I've used Precision and Morton, and Huma. I love the Huma gels as well. They're very sticky. I always feel like I end the run with like my fingers sticking together, but they're great. And they also have sodium in them. So for my salty sweaters out there, like, great option for sure. But the variety is what's really going to help you with this absorption and help you reach that 90 grams of carbs and still feel pretty good during the run.
So for runners who are maybe a little shy around sport nutrition products, or let's be completely honest, it's just not in the budget, right? Like you said, those gels are getting expensive, and a runner might prefer to or try to fuel with, let's say, regular food options, things that are not found in the sports nutrition aisle. What are some good options there?
Yeah. So my favorite is dates. When I trail run, that is my go-to. I love like the larger dates. It's about 2 of them are probably close to 30 grams of carbs. You can check your label. They're all going to be a little different. So a dried fruit, dates, raisins, apricots, that might not work so well on your GI system. Again, everybody is so different. So see what works for you, try it, practice it. Applesauce pouches are a really good option, like those go-go squeezes. My kids eat those, so they're always on hand for us. The problem with something like the go-go squeezes, they're just bigger. And you're only getting, I don't know off the top of my head, but somewhere between 15 and 20 grams of carbs, as opposed to 30 in a quarter of the size. So that's just one thing to consider. Something like a banana, if you have the ability to carry it or pack it, again, I'm thinking more trail ultra where you do have a vest. that's going to be a great option. Orange juice is technically a natural option. So you can always go that route. I've mentioned graham crackers and the pre-run fuel, but that's a good option. Pretzels, they're nice and salty. I've heard somebody recommend like salted boiled potatoes. I can't possibly bring myself to imagine eating that. Maybe in an ultra for sure, but on a road marathon wouldn't be my go-to. But there's lots of carb options out there, but I want you to be thinking about simple, like your graham crackers, your Pop Tarts, the simpler the better in this situation, because you want to be able to utilize it quickly. No fiber, low protein is what we're looking for.
Before we move on to post-run fueling, I want to talk about learning how to eat while you run. This is a skill. I think it's very important that we mention this is a skill. When I first started carrying fluids and then eventually adding in gels, I could not run and do another thing at the same time. So when I was taking because my go-to small water bottle is a flip belt bottle because it's only 11 ounces. But so I would have to slow down to a walk, reach behind me, take the belt, bottle out, unscrew it, drink it, put it back in, and then start running again. Over time, I can now do that while I run. I can now do that at race pace, but it takes time. So for everybody who's struggling with maybe drinking or eating or chewing and swallowing when you run, you just need to practice.
Yeah, practice makes perfect, right? But also, if you are struggling with that, it is okay to slow down and walk too. Like, don't clog up the aid station. Try to be considerate of that. If you're taking your gel at an aid station where you're getting water, great, grab it, keep going, and then step to the side, and then you can slow down. I always say, like, if you're on the fence of like, oh, I can't slow down, or I can't take the gel at race pace, so I'm going to skip it all together, or I need to slow down and take it, you're going to actually run faster if you slow down and take the gel in its entirety and then keep going. But I totally agree. I think taking it at race pace is something that you have to practice. And that is something that I make sure that my athletes always do, is practice the gel eventually at race pace, because guess what? Your digestion is also different at race pace. So when you have a workout, don't save the gel for your easy portion. Take it during the work. I see that so often where, let's say you have a workout where it's maybe like 2 by 3 miles at marathon pace. And people are like, great, I'm going to take that gel in those in between miles. No, take it at race pace. We want to make this the real deal, from opening it, digesting it, consuming it, and discarding of it. We want all of that to be at race pace.
Now, kind of a related question. What about if I'm doing a workout for a race that I don't need to fuel in? Like, let's say I'm training for a 5K, I'm doing speed work on the track. The workout is long enough where I would benefit from fuel, so maybe I brought some with me, but I can take that in my recovery interval, right?
That's a good question. If you're not going to take the gel on race day, then you don't necessarily need to practice taking it at 5K pace, right? If you're not going to take the gel on race day at that pace, then you don't necessarily have to practice with it that way. But if you are running a race that you are, like for some of us, that might be a 10K, a half marathon, and a marathon, that's when it's really important that you are taking it at race pace, or at least doing some of your gel intake at race pace. But otherwise, you can take it during your recovery if you're not going to take it on race day at that pace. Does that make sense?
Well, we finished our run, or we finished our race, and we're thinking about our post-run nutrition here. What are the basics of post-run nutrition?
Post-run nutrition is one of my least favorite things to talk about, because there's so much nuance. I said intra-run was my favorite because it's like more cut and dry. Like, this is how much we need. Post-run is so tricky. It depends how far you ran and when your next meal is. So I will say this: if you did an interval workout or a long run, anything more than, 90 minutes, but honestly, really anything more than 70 minutes, I think can also fall under this. Then I need you to have a separate post-run snack that is not your meal. This is something where you need at least 20 grams of protein, maybe 25, maybe up to 30, especially for my menopausal age group there. More protein as we age, the better. The better for muscle recovery, the better for muscle repair, muscle growth. So we need protein, but not just protein. You also need carbs, because we just depleted all of those carb stores, right? No matter how good your pre-run nutrition or intra-run nutrition was, it's never going to be a one-to-one replacement. So we still need those carbs after we run. And the quicker we have the protein and the carbs after we run, the easier it is for our body to uptake all of those carbs and start repairing and restoring all of the muscle glycogen and just repairing the muscles in general. So carbs, somewhere around 50, 60 grams of carbs post long run, post workout, and at least 20 grams of protein, 20 to 30 grams of protein post workout. Again, long run, interval workout. This is not your breakfast. This is a separate shake, smoothie, something. Then we're going to have a meal within 2 hours of that. So basically, let's do an example of, let's say you finished your run, you're an early bird. So you finished your run at 8 a.m. and you're about to go to work. You're going to have that smoothie, or, even if it's a protein shake with a banana at a minimum. Maybe a better example would be like a protein shake and a Lara bar, something like that. Then you're going to have your breakfast, your balanced meal, carb, protein, color, your athlete's plate, if you will. You can go back to that one. Within 2 hours. But I don't want you to do what I did when I was underfueling, which is I'm going to wait till I get to work. Breakfast is better when I get to work. So I would wait until I showered, drove to work, clocked in, sat down, started opening my emails, and then started eating breakfast. Well, now it's been at least an hour since I finished. I missed that window of opportunity, and I started just delaying my nutrition throughout the day. So, okay, that's number one example. If you ran something less than an hour at an easy pace, but you're gonna eat a meal within the hour after finishing that run, totally fine. That breakfast, as long as it's balanced, it has carbs, it has at least 20 grams of protein and some color, some fruit, some antioxidants in there. Your meal can be your recovery. If it was less than an hour and easy, that's big asterisk there. Don't run hard and wait for breakfast. Okay. And then here's the third example. I told you this, there's some nuance here. Let's say you did a run, but it wasn't first thing in the morning and it's not about to be mealtime. Maybe you ran at 3, 4 o'clock, or you finished at 4 o'clock, but dinner's not going to be until 6 or 7. Do not wait. Even if it was an easy run, still get yourself somewhere around 20 grams of protein and, somewhere around at least 30 grams of carbs right after that run. Let it be almost like a balanced snack. And then you can have your meal, 2 hours later, or whenever dinner or the next meal falls in. But it is tricky when you don't time your run with a meal. Then you need to make sure that you're recovering with something. Or for those of you that run after work or after dinner, even my evening runners, don't finish the run and go straight to bed. You got to have the carbs and protein to help your body recover, and then you can go to bed. Okay, that was a lot.
No, it's important. I think, because this for me, I think takes the most planning, because the pre-run snack is easy. It's a snack. The in-run, like you said, it's pretty cut and dried. We only have so many options and most people find their thing and stick with it. But post-run, it depends on what you have going on that day and what the weather is and what you have in the fridge and like all these things. And it's so easy to skip it by accident, honestly, or like leave it on the counter while you go to work. So that, I think, if people are struggling with this, I think it's understandable that this might be a trickier component.
Definitely. I totally agree. Well, and the part we left out is you don't always feel hungry after you run. So you think, oh, I don't need it, I'm not hungry. But that's when you actually do need it. The reason you don't feel hungry is it's a hormonal imbalance. Your satiety hormone, the hormone that says your body is full, is higher after you run, especially in the heat. And your hunger hormone that triggers your appetite is suppressed, especially in the heat or especially after a long run. So you don't feel that hunger. So this is where we need to do what's called practical hunger. And we need to implement that nutrition even when we don't feel like we need it, even when you're busy. I would rather see you cut your run by half a mile, save yourself five minutes right there and make time to eat. Like, you will benefit so much more by running 5 minutes less and getting that nutrition in than getting that last half mile in. Or God forbid, we don't round out our mileage to that whole number. Just cut it, come inside and get yourself some fuel. If it's coming down to minutes, that protein shake, especially something like Tailwind, makes a really nice recovery drink that's got carbs and protein in it. It might not, I don't know exactly off the top of my head, it might not have enough carbohydrates in it. You might still have to pair it with something like a banana or toast, but it can be so simple. It can be another drink where you're, again, getting the benefits of that protein, fluid, maybe some electrolytes in there. That's why I love a smoothie. You can kind of get it all in one place. Like, have it pre-made. Costco sells these smoothie packets where you still have to make it and blend it yourself, but it's like pre-packaged with, it's got some greens in there. It's got okra and it's got all kinds of fun things. And it's got your bananas and your berries that make it taste really yummy. But that with some whey protein and Greek yogurt and then your milk of choice, boom, you're done. You're drinking that in the shower and you're on your way to work.
I love it. And I love that you brought up that point about hunger too, because that's so true. I mean, walking in the door, like the last thing I've always found, you're at the end of a long run when you're dreaming about ice cold orange Gatorade and pizza, as soon as you get home, you're like, I would rather do anything than eat. I would rather do anything than than eat right now. It's just so weird how that switch can flip. But that tells you, right? I think for me, when I'm getting that hungry on a long run, that tells me that I definitely need to pay attention to my nutrition when I get home.
Yes, definitely. It's your body's way of letting you know that it's starting to be depleted. So, yeah. And, I think one fun thing I've been doing, well, I don't know if it's fun, but a reminder to myself to not skip my post-run fuel is I'll put my coffee thermos or my coffee mug in in the fridge with my protein shake that's pre-made. Even my husband the other day was like, is this empty? And I was like, yes, it is. That's my reminder to get the protein shake because I know I won't skip the coffee. So I put it with the protein shake that's already made because I kept forgetting it. So you can do some kind of like innovative tricks like that to help yourself not forget.
Well, in the a limited amount of time that we have available, I am super excited to start to wrap up this episode. No, I'm excited to wrap it up. I'm excited that we got to talk today, and now we do have to start wrapping it up. But Cortney, I want to go through some of the more common running nutrition myths and do a little myth busting. Okay. So I would love to know if there's anything recently that you've seen a running nutrition myth that you thought, oh, hold up, that's not true.
Yeah, I mean, I think the age-old one is that if I lose weight, I'll run faster. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, that could be an episode in itself, but if you are forcing yourself to lose weight and reducing caloric intake and carbohydrate intake, you're not going to run fast for long. And so you got to work with what you got. You got to work with the body type that you have and make sure that a well-fueled body will always run faster than an underfueled body.
I think there was just a study that came out that looked at short-term caloric restriction in the run-up to competition. They did this in like elite or sub-elite runners. And it essentially said, well, yeah, they lost weight, but it did not improve performance.
Good. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where that study went. I was afraid when you started.
Yeah, and it didn't help. Because I think that's that we think, oh, but if I just do it for a short period of time, oh, if I just do it right in the lead up to race day, or oh, if I just only do it for a month or two and just lose that last little bit of weight, those last kilos, last couple pounds, it won't cause that much problems. It won't cause that many problems, but apparently that might not be the case.
Yeah. Exactly. And then you go in underfueled when you could have been carb loading and then you have a full tank. So that's definitely one. I would say another is, so much of a protein craze of, just everything is fortified with protein. It seems like these days, I mean, there's protein cereals and protein granola and protein. I don't even know. The protein is added to everything. And that's not necessarily the best option. I would rather see you get more whole foods and protein from actual protein sources, eggs and meat and fish and tofu and tempeh and, beans. There's so many options, whether you're plant-based or, you eat meat. I'd rather you get your protein from whole sources.
I'm glad you brought that up. Protein. I mean, protein is not a new fad, but it's definitely having a moment. What are the actual general recommendations for daily protein intake? Because I think there are some really crazy numbers out there that people might be struggling with.
Yeah, I'll talk in terms of pounds just because we're currently in America. So if you're a kilogram person, we'll just have to modify this a little bit. But so about 0.6 to 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight for an endurance athlete. Now, those numbers might change a little bit, plus or minus, depending on your body, what you have going on, specific needs. Obviously, it's best to work with a dietitian to get your individualized needs, but that's kind of the general recommendation for endurance athletes.
So it's just interesting. I used to, think, oh, a pound of protein per pound of body weight. And it's just when I have people asking me like, oh, am I really supposed to be eating 170 grams of protein per day? I say probably not, but you should probably talk to an RD about that.
Yeah, exactly. And you want to space the protein out throughout the day too, not just save it for one meal or try to cram it in the afternoon.
Any recent, I want to say like new myths that we've seen popping up? I'm trying to think if there's any. I mean, the kind of clean eating thing. I think we're maybe starting to move away from sugar as being bad. I don't know. Maybe I'm just seeing less of that in my space.
Yeah, it might just be. I feel like anytime I post anything about Gatorade or use an example with Gatorade, people really get upset. And I think it's important to do what feels right for your body. Of course, it should feel good, but we need to remember that sugar is not necessarily a bad thing. And when people say, "Oh, well, sugar can cause inflammation," and it's like, well, yes, but so does stress, and so does lack of sleep, and we live in an extremely stressed out world these days. So, instead of attacking nutrition and things that can also help fuel our body, let's make sure that we're getting, tackling stress and lack of sleep if we're looking at reducing inflammation.
And the other thing too, if it's going to make somebody more comfortable if they're able to fuel with a gel that has certain properties, I personally am fine with that. Yeah. I think it's so tough to navigate this, and I don't envy anybody who can't imagine how you navigate this like full time, because this is all you do is just talk about nutrition professionally. But that like having that, yes, most people probably eat more sugar than they need to, but also, yes, for this population, it's an important source of fuel. Like it's tricky to have conversations with that kind of nuance, especially when we're talking about such a varied and diverse population as runners.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I think especially when it comes to like sugar per se, it's important to recognize that timing is important, and so like obviously we don't want to. I mean, everybody knows this, but like we don't want to eat a gel as like a bedtime snack, right? It has a purpose and a certain time and place, but it's also important to recognize that carbohydrates break down to sugar in our body. It's just that something like a quinoa that's got, other properties like fiber and protein provide a little bit more nutrition along the way, as opposed to like eating a spoonful of honey. But at the end of the day, our body still is going to recognize it as sugar essentially.
So, Cortney, I want to again thank you so much for being here today for our redux of our Running Nutrition 101. Is there anything that you are really excited about, looking forward to in the sports nutrition landscape for 2025 and beyond?
Gosh, so many things. I just feel like being a runner this day and age is so fun. Just like, this has nothing to do with nutrition, but like just the super shoes and the shoe technology and the gel technology and how things are changing. And I love that I do feel like people are starting to fuel more and be more interested in nutrition. So that excites me. I love just teaching runners how to fuel right, because I want them to enjoy the sport and find longevity in this sport. That's always my goal above even PRs, is I just want everybody to enjoy running and find pure joy in it. So I'm excited about that. My kids are starting to run, little races, nothing serious. I know. My almost 2-year-old ran her first, I'm going to put it in quotes again, like race on the 4th of July. It was like a couple blocks, but it was so cute to see them with bib numbers on and medals around their neck. And so just starting to like share that joy with my family is really awesome.
That's so wonderful, especially being able to model running in a way that has nothing to do with body size and weight loss. Like my mom ran, but by the time that she was a mom and she had me, she was running to lose weight or to keep weight off. And it was always very much about like body size. And I wish that she'd been able to just run because she loved it, rather than feeling that she had to make her body look a certain way. So being every runner that I work with who is a parent who is able to be that kind of runner for their kids, it makes me so happy, Cortney. So just thank you for being you around, that kind of parent runner.
Oh, thank you. I know. And then they're always like, well, did you win? And like, eventually I was like, yes, I won. I won my own race in my heart. I won. Okay. Like, people are very good here. So yeah, it's
well, Cortney, like I said, thank you so much for being here today. I do know, like, as you being the OG guest on the podcast, I know that there are hundreds, maybe thousands of runners who have hopefully discovered you because of that. But if somebody is interested in learning more about you, working with you, I know that there are a ton of Running Explained athletes who are in your circle already. But where can people do that?
Yeah, you can definitely find me on Instagram at eatwell.runbetter. And then my website is www.eatwellrunbetter.com. So if you want to learn more about my programs and what I offer, my philosophy, you can check out either of those sources, but definitely drop me a line on Instagram and say, hey, especially if you enjoyed the episode. I try to read all my messages and respond, so don't be a stranger. I love to connect on Instagram.
Well, that's where I will see you next, Cortney.
Yay. Thanks for having me, Elizabeth. I hope this was as enjoyable as the first one.